Psalm 23 is one of the most beloved and well-known chapters in the Bible. Traditionally attributed to King David, it is often referred to as "The Lord is my shepherd," and is a psalm of comfort and trust. Let's break down the imagery and symbolism of each verse, as well as offer some historical context to explore its deeper meaning. Psalm 23 was likely written by David during a period of personal reflection, most likely when he fled into exile from his son Absalom's rebellion against his rule. It is important to understand that David was a shepherd before becoming a king, and this experience influenced many of his writings. The imagery of God as a shepherd would have been deeply resonant for David, as he would have had intimate knowledge of the care and responsibility required in shepherding. In ancient Israel, a shepherd was seen as a caretaker, guide, protector, and provider, and these same roles are applied to God in this psalm. The themes of God's care, protection, and provision would have spoken directly to the experiences of the Israelites, who were often struggling with insecurity and uncertainty, particularly during times of conflict. Let us break down Psalm 23 verse by verse. Verse 1. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. The Lord as a shepherd is a powerful metaphor. A shepherd's responsibility was to guide, protect, and provide for their sheep. By calling God my shepherd, David affirms the intimate and personal relationship between God and the believer. The phrase, I shall not want, means that with God as the shepherd, the faithful will lack nothing. God will provide for all needs, spiritual, emotional, and physical. Shepherding was an occupation of great care and responsibility. David himself was a young shepherd, so he knew the significance of having someone to tend to you, especially in the harsh conditions of the wilderness. In times of danger or scarcity, a shepherd's care was vital, and David reflects that trust in God's provision. Verse 2. He maketh me to lie down in green pastures. He leadeth me beside the still waters. Green pastures symbolizes abundance, peace, and nourishment. The image of a sheep resting in lush fields conveys peace and security, while still waters represent calm and refreshment. This imagery evokes a sense of tranquility and renewal, God providing a safe, restful environment for the soul. The Israelites often found themselves wandering in desolate places, especially during their time in the desert or during periods of exile. For a shepherd to lead their flock to green pastures and still waters would be a sign of abundance and care. This verse speaks to God's guidance to a place of peace and spiritual restoration, which was important for a people who had endured hardship. Verse 3. He restoreth my soul, he leadeth me in the paths of righteousness for his name's sake. Restoring the soul is a powerful image of spiritual healing and renewal. This is not just physical nourishment, but also a deep inner restoration. Paths of righteousness refer to living a life aligned with God's will, and God leads the believer along these paths to righteousness as an expression of his character and authority. The people of Israel often faced moral and spiritual struggles, and a return to righteousness was a recurring theme in the Old Testament. David's own life story involved moments of great moral failure, but his recognition of God's ability to restore his soul is deeply significant here. This restoration is not for the believer's own sake, but to honor God's name and God's glory. Verse 4. Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil. For thou art with me, thy rod and thy staff, they comfort me. The valley of the shadow of death is a powerful image of danger, suffering, and even death itself. The valley suggests a dark, perilous place, but the shadow implies that the danger is not necessarily inevitable or final. Despite these threats, the psalmist expresses unshaken trust in God's presence. The rod and staff are tools a shepherd would use to protect the flock from predators and guide them. These instruments provide comfort because they symbolize God's constant protection and guidance. This verse might resonate with the challenges David faced in his own life, including fleeing from King Saul, the constant threat from enemies, and the emotional burdens he carried. The valley of the shadow of death could be a metaphor for these intense moments of fear and danger. The rod and staff also allude to God's covenant with the Israelites, where God's law, the rod, and his guidance, the staff, were seen as instruments of protection and discipline. Verse 5. Thou preparest a table before me in the presence of mine enemies. Thou anointest my head with oil, my cup runneth over. This verse shifts the metaphor to a banquet, with God preparing a lavish feast even in the midst of adversaries. The imagery of anointing my head with oil speaks to both an act of honor and the refreshing nature of oil in the ancient world. The overflowing cup symbolizes abundance and blessings that exceed the need, signifying God's generosity and provision even in adversity. In ancient Israel, anointing with oil was a sign of blessing, consecration, or even kingship. This could refer to God's favor upon the psalmist in the face of enemies, as well as God's provision despite the challenges. The metaphor of an overflowing cup also evokes the image of God's covenant, blessings that were poured out abundantly. Verse 6, Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, and I will dwell in the house of the Lord forever. Here, goodness and mercy personify God's attributes, suggesting that these qualities will follow the psalmist throughout his life. The idea of dwelling in the house of the Lord is a powerful expression for longing for eternal fellowship with God. The house of the Lord may refer to the temple or the presence of God, and the word forever speaks to the eternal nature of this communion. Historically, the Israelites had a deep reverence for the temple as the dwelling place of God, and the idea of living in God's presence forever would have been deeply meaningful. For David, who experienced moments of exile and distance from the sacred, the hope of eternal communion with God would have been an ultimate expression of peace and fulfillment. In conclusion, Psalm 23 beautifully weaves together images of God's guidance, protection, and provision. It speaks to the trust and relationship that David, and by extension the believer, has with God. The psalm is full of comforting symbols, from the shepherd's care for the sheep to the abundance of a banquet and the security of a home. For the historical context, it resonates deeply with the challenges of life in ancient Israel, with moments of trial and victory, offering reassurance that God is always present to guide and protect His people, both in this life and beyond. I hope you enjoyed this deeper look at Psalm 23. May God bless you and keep you safe. Join us again next time here at Beyond Chapter and Verse, and make sure to leave a comment and tell us what you think. Your feedback is always welcome.